The owner gets quite a big kind of a fancy gold cup thing, but the trainer and the jockey gets a gold goblet like the size of a wine glass. And yes, there's been lots of things drank out of them. Yes,
four
and still are every now and again.
Hello everyone and welcome to a Cheltenham special of Rematch, our look at three of the greatest Cheltenham races in the modern era. I'm Richard Hoiles and today I'm joined by Jim Culloty, who was a central figure in two of those races. Jim, before we get on to the races themselves, just explain to people what the Cheltenham Festival meant to a jockey.
It's actually almost unfair on other racecourses and other races because Cheltenham is now like the Olympics of horse racing, national hunt horse racing. From both, I've been a jockey and a racehorse trainer. But either way, you get a nice young horse in your yard. He goes and wins his bumper first time out. You go and win your novice hurdle first time out. First question: the minute the horse passes the line, first question: could this horse go to Cheltenham one day? That is the first question.
The dreaded C word.
And if the answer to that is yes, I think he could be good enough to go to Cheltenham, then all of his next races are all en route to Cheltenham. You make your plan around that. If he's not going to be good enough for Cheltenham, then you go a completely different avenue with him. You know what I mean? You then try and keep him in the worst level. If you get a chance, you try and get him, bring him up to the better levels. So it is, as I say, it's unfair on a lot of the other big races. Like there's £100,000 races on every Saturday, but people are still thinking that's only actually a stepping stone to Cheltenham.
There's nothing better than entering a great sporting arena, and Cheltenham is that. You, of course, are all locked away in the jockey's room. I'm quite interested in the dynamics that go on there, the psychological warfare, people who are normally quiet, are a little louder and vice versa. What's it like with the personalities in there?
You've almost just said it because Cheltenham's one and the Grand National is the other one that people's personalities change completely. You know, you get the lad who's the kind of joker in the weigh room every single day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Great fun, talking about what he did the weekend. Not really taking the racing that seriously. It's just kind of a means to get a few quid in the pocket for next weekend. Do you know what I mean? All of a sudden, you go to Cheltenham, you're riding a horse with a chance. Oh, that's the goalpost changed because that is the goal, and vice versa. The kind of fellows who are normally kind of quiet and mundane and hardworking and diligent and keep their mouth shut and work hard, all of a sudden they're riding someone with a chance at Cheltenham. You just see their entire demeanour change as well. You know, they become all chatty and they're kind of realising that they're kind of, this is what we do this job for, to be here, and they're almost celebrating being there, you know.
Everyone has a chance across the 20-odd races, but the pinnacle of the festival is always the Gold Cup, and it is the Cheltenham Gold Cup that are going to make up the three races we're going to talk about. It still does remain, doesn't it, if you like, the unique challenge of national hunt sport.
Well, they call it the Blue Riband, whatever that means. But yes, it is. It is the. It's kind of everything what national hunt horses are bred for. They're bred to stay, to jump, to be sound, to last long enough to stay sound enough for long enough to end up running in Gold Cups. That is what people breed national hunt horses for. So it is the pinnacle.
Well, that leads me nicely into the very first race we're going to talk about, and the race you were at the centre of, 2004. Because everything you've just said hadn't really been true for many years, in the sense that if you won the Gold Cup, it was very, very difficult to retain it. If we go to 2004, we had a horse right at the top of the national hunt tree in Best Mate, a horse you'd been associated with right from an early stage, who was bidding for the first horse since Arkle to win 3 consecutive Gold Cups. Just tell us a little bit about your memories of Best Mate, perhaps as a young horse, because I don't come from a horse racing background, but one thing I do remember about him was he was a very, very striking horse. Now, that doesn't always turn into ability, but in his case, it did.
Yeah, he was start to start. He was beautifully bred. He was by probably what was an unknown sire when he covered Best Mate's mother, who's called Cat Day, but she had a very good pedigree, Cat Day. Undesperado was by a sire called Topville, who then ended up kind of a sire of sires. So there was Undesperado, Scirocco, no, actually not Scirocco. Oh, there was a bunch of them there at the time. They were all by Topville, and they were all great national hunt sires. A lot of them in France, actually. But so best mate came along. Henrietta Knight saw him running at point to point in Ireland, and he actually, which they often do on purpose, to give him a nice little school round. Point to point is 3 miles. To give him a nice little school round, jump around, introduction to racing for 2 miles, pull up, still a fresh horse, go out 2 weeks later, win their point to point, which is exactly what he did. He was then bought by Henrietta Knight. Like a lot of the great horses, both national hunt and flat, he kind of saved his best for the racecourse. Like, he wasn't, although he was a beautiful mover, beautiful to look at, conformation-wise and everything, very good jumper, but in his homework, he wasn't necessarily that impressive. And as a result of that, he won his bumper first time out at Cheltenham, and I think he was about 12-1. So that's what we thought of him. We thought, yes, lovely horse for the future, but he's not an aeroplane that's going to win his bumper first time out, especially around Cheltenham. But he did. And that proved him the whole way through. He wouldn't have been that impressed with his homework, but every day he went to the races, he produced it, you know what I mean?
So let's roll forward to 2004. Best mate definitely at the top of the tree, bidding for that third success. What was the pressure like on the build-up to that? The media attention. Everybody knew the owner, Jim Lewis, Henrietta Knight, yourself. Everybody wanted a piece of you on the build-up to that Cheltenham Festival.
Yeah, and I suppose, aside of the times again, like back in the day, you kind of wouldn't really involve the press in, or the press's opinion on how you train a horse or whatever. Henrietta Knight stood her ground. She was getting plenty abuse for not running the horse often enough.
Yeah, there used to be a well-known story about, a joke about that, about the sense that they tried to implement a best mate rocking horse, but it never took off because it was only allowed out of his box 3 times a year. Yeah. And those sort of jokes, you know, in a way, when we now look back on that, she was ahead of her time because it was what gave best mate longevity, and it's a sort of modern way, isn't it, now to only go there off the back of 3 or 4 runs?
Yeah. There was a number of reasons for it. He was... he did put his all into every run, and he did come home a tired horse, and he needed time between his races. Again, when you're up at that level and you don't want to really see him getting beaten, there's actually not that many options for a horse of that caliber. She trained the horse beautifully. He won King George that year. I was injured or banned, I can't remember, but I missed it anyway. So then, rolling on to Cheltenham, the press had a lot to say, as they do, but Hen handled it very well. She was tough enough to stand her ground with her training of the horse, yet engage the press and have them in for press days and take photographs and interviews, and I just always chatted away to the press. I watched my P's and Q's, and you learn to only tell them what you want them to know, kind of thing. But
yeah, we're horrible people, us press, you see. It's like
well, they have been known to take things out of context now and again. But yes, there was, needless to say, enormous pressure. From a jockey's point of view, there's enormous pressure in the build-up, shall we say, particularly on the day. You know, you're sitting there, you know, for the weeks before, you'll be careful because it's on the final day of the Cheltenham Festival, and you don't want to get injured on day 2. So you'll be very, very careful about what you ride. That's a funny story there. I met my agent a couple of years ago at Cheltenham, my old agent, Chris Broad, and we always have good banter, give each other plenty slagging. And I said to whoever was with me, my girlfriend or something, I said, you do realise I could have been champion jockey if I actually had a proper agent who actually got out of bed and made some phone calls in the morning. And the trouble with Jim was he didn't want to ride anything after Christmas because he was minding himself for the Gold Cup.
All roads to best mate.
Yeah.
The expectation must have been great because he was very much a people's horse by then, wasn't he? You know, you had just
he had a huge following, and people still like. I joke now regularly because I was in Ireland at the weekend and I met some people that I hadn't met before, and somebody introduced me as, this is Jim Culloty. He won 3 Gold Cups on Best Mate, and I was like, 4. No, he rode 3 Gold Cup winners, or won 3 Gold Cups, and I go, 4.
Because the extra one.
Nobody remembers Lord Windermere.
Well, we're going to come on to Lord Windermere because we're going to actually remember him because it was pretty unique for you to ride a Gold Cup winner and then have a Gold Cup winner. Let's line up at the start then. Best mate, short-priced favourite. What are your main concerns or what are your main plans as to how to execute that all-important third win?
Well, I can't even go on to that until I say one very important thing about Best Mate. He was a fast ground horse. If you go back through all his forms, he got beaten by Seabold once at Ascot, and everybody said it was the best weight carrying performance of a horse since Arkle, even though he got beaten. And I was thinking, well, that's absolute rubbish because he would have won 10 lengths on fast ground. The ground was soft. Fast ground, he was unbeatable in my opinion. And going to that third Gold Cup, it poured rain all through the night before, and the ground was gone soft, and that was my only danger. I was not. I had the utmost confidence in the horse. I knew he was at peak health and ready to put in a performance of his life, but the ground could beat him. I wasn't worried about the opposition. It was the ground I was worried about. So myself and Terry Billiken walked the track. Well, we walked it fairly regularly, but we walked it on the morning, and they basically given us like 2 meters of fresh ground on the inside, and the hallowed strip, shall we say. Now you're riding an odds-on favourite in the Gold Cup. Really, you kind of keep out, and you'd like to just keep out, stay out of trouble, stay away from everybody, just do your own thing and go and win your race. No interference, no risk of getting brought down or whatever. But in this instance, I had no choice. I had to go down the inside. So I lined up on the inner, stayed on the inner, never came off it the whole way. And I knew that the minute I did have to move and come off it, that was then going to expose my vulnerability. So we stayed there as long as we possibly could. And then when I did want to make my move, Paul Carberry decided to keep me there for a little bit longer.
Yeah, so for about 80% of the race, you must have been really happy.
Yeah.
Because Thierry Dumain went out in front first gold. They were pretty well spaced out. You had plenty of room, not just in your position, but you had a bit of room in front, bit of room behind. But as you say, as we began to get it more compact in the second circuit, Harbour Pilot was just in front of you, just drifting right and left. And then Sir Rembrandt improved quite swiftly on your outside. So let's take it about half a mile home. You're still a long way from home, as you'd say to me. When do you just begin to think, okay, I need to work myself out off this best strip of ground?
I always say this to people about the Gold Cup because, you know, you always get these favourites getting beaten in the Gold Cup, etc. What people forget is they've really got to be an out-and-out stayer to win a Gold Cup. Like a 3-miler that doesn't get beyond 3 miles won't win a Gold Cup. You know, they really have to stay. So you spend your whole time during the race conserving energy, which means rhythm, all about rhythm. So when you make a move, like people say, make a move to second last, make a move to third last. No, that's not really what happens. You're on about your horse's rhythm, and you're keeping the rhythm, you're keeping the momentum. So it's basically when the others kind of start stopping is when you kind of just let them roll on, like, and then when at Cheltenham, then basically is when you turn in, then that's when you're kind of going to give your all, you know what I mean? But until then, you're just conserving energy. So when we were coming down the hill and I wanted to make my move, I just wanted to keep the fluidity and the kind of the rhythm going, and it was just the right time because the horse was in my hands running and they were starting to slow down a little bit around me, and that wasn't the case. Paul Carberry kept me in, but we still never really, like, if you watch it, like, I never really had to do that. I never really had to stop or alter his rhythm that much. I just kind of, no, we can't go yet, we can't go yet, we can't go yet, and then eventually pulled out. And then when I did go, it was electric. But away we went then to go and win our race, and hit the front, and we kind of had it in the bag, and like a lot of horses would, at the end of 3.25 miles on ground soft and ideal, he started to weaken a little bit, half idling, half getting tired. He thought, the horse thought, and I thought we'd our race won. Crossed the line, gave a sigh of relief. Just as I was giving the sigh of relief, looked over and I saw Sir Rembrandt on the far side of the track, bang up sides, and I hadn't seen him before then.
Even at the line, you hadn't really seen him.
I hadn't seen him until I crossed the line, and on that line he was bang upsides me across the track, and I did not know whether I'd won or lost. So that's why if you look at the previous 2 years, it was like a punch of the air, job done. That year it was like, oh.
So I don't think there was ever a photo. I think it was half a length in the end. I think the result was announced really quickly. Did you do the jockeys thing of checking the number cloth, or did you know from other people's reaction that you had actually won?
Other people were cheering and saying well done, so Rembrandt was flying. So let's just say across the line, maybe it was a stride after the line I looked across, and he was bang upsides me at that point, and I didn't know. So yeah, it took me. I think probably until I didn't actually believe I'd won it until I'd say I heard it over the tenor, yeah.
And the scenes afterwards were excellent. I mean, Simon Holt's iconic commentary of 3 Gold Cups, the first since Arkle to do so, only the 4th in history to have achieved that, including the great Golden Miller, of course, won 5. But the scenes afterwards were fantastic, weren't they? Because he was the people's horse, and in many ways the betting was superfluous. Everyone had the result that they wanted.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I think so. Like how many people would have actually backed him at that price? I don't know. I don't really get involved in the gambling side of it, but certainly people loved him because he was a lovable horse. He was consistent. He was genuine. He was a good. He had all the attributes I said earlier. He is what we breed national hunt horses for. Like he had it all, and like I said in an interview before, I described it. He was the ultimate athlete, like any athlete, human or equine. He'd the breeding, he'd the kind of conformation, and the health, the heart, the lungs, and the brain, all to allow him to achieve his full potential. He had it all.
And was he the greatest in the modern era in your eyes?
In my eyes, he was, because I don't think we mightn't always have seen the best of him, because he was a fast ground horse. That was the one thing. He did want really good ground, and obviously because he was like 16.3, he was a fine, big, strong horse, but he was a beautiful mover. But still, when they're that big, they tend to be heavy, and you would never, you'd be loath to run him on quick ground just in case you gave him an injury. But he was the exception. He actually wanted quick ground, and I don't think he ever would have had an injury, but still, he's a national hunt horse. He's got to perform in the winter on soft ground, so he had to go where he had to go. But if you actually look through all of his form, he was only ever beaten on soft ground, and he was most impressive on quick ground. But yes, I would say he was the best, because in order to be the best, you have to be consistent and have longevity, and he had all those things as well. You know what I mean? It's fine to be ultra talented, but A, not have the mentality, or B, not have the physical soundness. So yeah, it's fine to be the best for 2 races, but no good after that. But no, he was. Yeah, if I was to own a horse, if I was to buy any horse in the world around those times, and I won't be derogatory to any other horses, so I won't mention any other names. But yes, if I was to own a horse, he would be the one I would want to own. Yeah,
it is such a rare thing, isn't it, for that to be translated into the ability that he showed, and those Cheltenham dreams you were referring to right at the beginning to come true, not just once but 3 times in the major race.
And what people don't realise. So he got beaten in the Supreme Novice Hurdle, and I think it was my lack of experience beat him, if I'm being straight about it. So arguably could have won there. The following year, he was odds-on favourite for the Arkle, and was called off because of foot and mouth. And then he went and won 3 Gold Cups. So arguably he should have won 5 times at the festival. Like, that would be unbelievable. But it could have happened with that horse.
Jim, great to remember. Such a great horse.
The countdown to Cheltenham is on with Betway. Join our ambassador, 7-time Irish National Hunt champion jockey Paul Townend as the biggest week in racing gets closer. Download the Betway app today.
So that was Best Mate in 2004, probably your most memorable Gold Cup, although we've still got a good one to come as well. My most memorable was probably Denman versus Courtauld Star, 2008. Best Mate had dominated the staying scene, and yet we had, just 4 years later, probably the best head-to-head, wasn't it? The way the race developed. 2 horses in Courtauld Star and Denman that came from the same stable, yet divided opinion. What are your memories of that sort of rivalry as it began to bubble up?
Yeah, so So basically, Coteau Star was French bred and came from France. Denman was true Irish bred, came from Ireland, from the point-to-point scene. So you said torn loyalties, like
You were very much in the Denman camp.
they're always going to have torn loyalties anyway, but they're different backgrounds. You know what I mean? Coteau Star cost a fortune to buy. Denman was, in hindsight, a cheap horse. Me personally, Denman was more my type of horse. Fine, big, strong, good-looking, good jumper, carry weight, sound. You know what I mean? Coteau Star, although undoubtedly amazingly talented, his record in King George's, and then to go back to 2 miles and win the Tingle Creek and then run the Gold Cup, like adaptable, but like he wasn't the best jumper in the world. He used to miss. He broke his knee, was it, when he was a novice around Exeter. Ruby, he fell at the last, and Ruby remounted, and I think he still won, but he wasn't the full package, although he was extremely talented, but not the full package in my opinion. Often when he came under pressure, he'd hang a bit left, which again is a sign of some sort of a weakness somewhere. I was very much in the Denman camp.
But I think the point you make is what made it so fascinating, really, because Denman's nickname was the Tank, because he was a four-wheel drive. He was the sort you could take up any muddy field, whereas Coteau Star had that sort of cruising speed. He'd won at 2 miles. He was more your sort of Bentley Rolls Royce sort of thing that could look imperious, smooth, and that contrast of styles was really interesting, wasn't it?
You liked motor racing or whatever. Yeah, Coteau Star was. I had a Jaguar XK once, and I loved driving it. But in the end, I hated driving it because it was in Ireland and there was lots of potholes, and it had low profile, it had alloy wheels with low profile tyres, and I just keep getting punctures. So in the end, I hated driving it. I got rid of it. It was, I'm being very, very harsh and derogatory to Coteau Star, because he had all the class in the world, but just he could fall, he could miss. He just you could never, not like best mate, you could trust him with your life, whereas Coteau Star you couldn't. Denman you probably could, like with the weight carrying performance in the Hennessy, like he was unbelievable. You know what I mean? He was the Tank. No, I loved him. And funnily enough, before that Gold Cup that year, I did a Cheltenham preview, and Ruby Walsh, who, now don't get me wrong, we're great friends, but he can be fairly brash, and I said something in this Cheltenham preview. I said something silly about. I said something inaccurate about one of the novice hurdlers, and he jumped down my throat in front of a whole crowd, and he kind of embarrassed me, and I was...
You were smarting a bit when you
thinking myself, that wasn't very nice, Ruby, and then came to the Gold Cup, and Ruby was saying all the reasons why he was going to choose Coteau Star. Well, that was my opportunity for revenge. I jumped on him, I said, Ruby, you're going to be coming to the second last, watching Denman getting further and further away from you, in front of you, and the smile will soon be wiped off your face. And sure enough, that came to pass. I
always follow a bit of boxing, and I know we've on this podcast we've visited various different sports as well with Rematch, and there was a fight between Sugar Ray Leonard and Roberto Duran that sort of stuck in my mind. And when I did the commentary, I suppose, unbeknownst to me, it would resurface with the way you felt that it had been relentless in terms of the way. Roberto Duran was sort of your typical Panamanian or South American fighter, absolutely loved a scrap, had probably been grown up in a terribly poor part of the world, and would just wanted everything to be an absolute war. Whereas Sugar Ray Leonard danced around, had all the feet movement, sat behind his jab. And that, again, was the sort of the two. And I just found it fascinating. And I remember turning up on the morning of the race. And for various personal reasons, I hadn't followed racing quite as closely. We just had the birth of my first child, and it hadn't been entirely straightforward the following 6 months, etc. So we weren't getting much sleep. And we forget you remember the scarves? Everybody had a scarf. Either Coteau green and yellow, or it was Denman actually was the purple one because of Harry Findlay. And the ownership was interesting as well, because they were a little bit like the odd couple, the Denman owners, because you had the Barbers, who you'd know particularly well, dyed in the wool, point-to-point family, and Harry Findlay, who loved nothing more than having $500,000 on New Zealand at 1-8 in the World Cup.
Gambling geezer.
Yeah, and it made for a fascinating sort of personalities behind the horses as well. Clive Smith on a more conventional owner, I suppose, on Coteau Star side. But there was lots of different avenues that the press could exploit to build up this rivalry, really.
Paul Barber was a farmer from the West Country, obviously made a good few quid, milked a lot of cows. He was quoted once, he wanted to when he was a young fella, he wanted to milk 1,000 cows and own 1,000 acres and win a Gold Cup. So he ended up milking 2,000 cows, had 2,000 acres, and won 2 Gold Cups.
Pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. But he was, as you say, dyed in the wool, point-to-point background, and he was a fella you would wish him every success because he was the loveliest guy. He backed Paul Nicholls through thick and thin. When Paul Nicholls started training, you know what I mean? You'd kind of be delighted for him to win it, and yeah, it was great.
So we all rock up on the day, and as I say, the race begins to unfold, and it's relatively straightforward. Denman is just behind Neptune Collonges for the majority of the first circuit, and Ruby is sitting 4 or 5 lengths off, just keeping an eye on Denman. But what's interesting about the race when it gets looked back, because it is still a race that many people talk about, is that there's never really much doubt about the result, really, is there? It's just progressively more certain as we head through the circuit. And yet the response of the crowd to every little twist and turn, certainly from my experience as a commentator, I'll never repeat that, was amazing. People were so invested in it. Sam Thomas rode Denman, and you mentioned earlier when we were talking about best mate rhythm, that's what Denman had that day, wasn't it?
Absolutely. What I said earlier, to win a Gold Cup, really, like if you make mistakes and you don't get in a, or you run a bit keen, or you're not in rhythm, you can't win. Because when it comes to the grind at the end, you have had to have saved every bit. And Denman just got in that beautiful rhythm, jumped from fence to fence, and never at any point out of his comfort zone. And as you just said, you could nearly pick him as the winner from after jumping the first.
I suppose the key moment for Sam was he was happy to take a lead off Neptune Collonges, and then at halfway, one particularly good leap put him alongside. And I suppose the decision at that point is, do you take back or do you just roll on? And he took the latter decision.
I think Denman could be he was a fine, big, strong horse. I think he could get a bit strong, and you wouldn't want to get in a fight with him, you know what I mean? And I think you come down the hill with a circuit to go, and the crowd roars. I think he probably just grabbed hold of the bit. And I think you've got 2 choices when to do that. You kind of just keep the rhythm, let him, he wants to go a little bit, couple of miles an hour faster for now, just let him do it, because as soon as he goes to the front, you get away from that crowd, you know, he'll drop it again, or else you try and hang on to him, in which case you could end up in a little bit of a fight. And if you get a little bit of a fight, you might be keen for a few strides, or might be keen for a couple of furlongs, in which case you lose your rhythm. That is an interesting point, because that's a jockey riding with confidence. If you got the confidence and you're not caring what you've been told to do, you're just riding the horse to the best that you think you've ridden, then you have the confidence to do that. If you're riding without confidence and what you've been told to do is ringing in the back of your head, well, then you probably wouldn't have given him such a lovely ride. You know what I mean? But that's just the thing that happens on the day.
And then gradually in the second circuit, there was no catastrophic error from Corto Star's point of view, but there were lots of little brushing through the tops, and that unflappable equilibrium we were talking about just begun to unwind a bit, didn't it? Yeah,
there was no rhythm with Corto in that second circuit. Like, he was just kind of, you watch Ruby. Ruby doesn't move on a horse. That he just has a style of riding that he just doesn't move. You never see him pulling. You won't see him pushing until there's very, very little left. You know, he squeezes him up into the bit. He's got it quite. And when you see Ruby kind of moving a good bit, you know that he's in bother. Like, you know what I mean?
It was a long way out as well, wasn't it? You know, I mean, in hindsight, obviously Neptune Collonges, who was the other horse that's involved, just about the only other horse that's involved in the race ever, went on to win a Grand National. It was a real, all from the Paul Nicholls yard. I mean, multitude of riches that he had at that time.
Yeah, like Heroes Collonges was he a Welsh national winner as well? I mean, he just lacked a little bit of class for the Gold Cup. That's, you know, we say, as I alluded to earlier, you need a true out and out stayer. He was that, as he showed when I think he won a Welsh national, and he certainly obviously won the Grand National. But he just lacked that bit of class.
Yeah, there is a difference, isn't there? You should say right at the top of the pyramid between those that are right at the peak and those that are really, really good.
There's a top-class handicapper versus true Grade 1 horse, and he just wasn't a true Grade 1 horse. He was a top-class handicapper.
I suppose in my mind, the reason I I remember the race so well is that I still think that of all the races I've ever called and what have you, of that sort of division, I just don't think I would have seen any other horse that would have beaten Denman on that day. Just the rhythm he got into, the power, the physique, he was just brutal. Now maybe
He'd have given Best Mate a lovely lead.
The ground would probably have been the key factor between the two, probably, wouldn't it? Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
To be honest, in terms of, as you say, the smooth travelling Best Mate on good ground probably would have potentially had his measure up the hill, but on soft he might have had you.
We'd have never got him. Yeah, on soft ground we'd have looked a bit like Cota Star today.
Yeah. And the irony about the division, I suppose, is I went away thinking that's it. That the question had been answered. It was Denman. Denman was the future, and yet ironically, it was the hard race that, I wouldn't say broke Denman, but he had the fibrillating heart afterwards. Things didn't go according to plan, and even though he won a second Hennessy under a really welter burden, he wasn't quite the same horse again. And yet Cota Star would come back and win multiple King Georges, regain a Gold Cup. And again, the careers just went different ways. Cota Star, probably when you look back at him, the reason he does have such a strong following is his durability. He took a defeat and came back from it.
But probably broke his knee as a young horse, and he got beaten and fell and broke fences in half and kept going. You absolutely admire him for so many reasons, but for me, he wasn't the perfect article.
And Denman on that day just about was. As I say, he never quite regained those heights. But that period of time, we're talking about Best Mate, and we'll come on to the last race we're going to talk about shortly. You dominated the division. That era, in the Denman, Cota Star, to be followed by Long Run, it was the vintage sort of period, really, wasn't it, in terms of competitiveness for that division? No standout, but you went there with 3 or 4 really top quality staying chasers.
Who developed a following because they kept coming back. Long Run the same, kept coming back, year after year. Cota, Denman, that's what national racing is all about.
Yeah, I think that is. I think that's why I know certainly from a television point of view, you struggle on the flat to put people's, horses' names in people's perspective. They'll know some good ones like Enable and Frankel and what have you. But come the Derby, no one really will have heard of those horses going in. Whereas national hunt-wise, as soon as you get the reappearance of a well-known star in October, the season's up and running, isn't it?
Yeah.
Best Mate would have been the example there.
Hopefully that will change again with the flat racing, because they went through a stage there that literally once they won their Group 1 as a 3-year-old, they were like packed off the stud. Whereas now I think both Coolmore and probably Sheikh Mohammed, who are the 2 big powerhouses, they're both kind of thinking, let's just keep these horses going for another year and another year, because racing needs it.
Yeah, certainly the heroes, and I think to my mind there's no bigger hero than Denman in that 2008 Gold Cup.
Yeah.
The countdown to Cheltenham is on with Betway. Join our ambassador, 7-time Irish National Hunt champion jockey Paul Townend as the biggest week in racing gets closer. Download the Betway app today.
So on to the final of our 3 Gold Cups we're going to talk about, and it's 2014. And you were involved in a different capacity by now. The riding career had finished, and you were training, and you had a runner. What was it different? What's it like different? We were talking about the weighing room beforehand for Best Mate. What's the difference of rocking up there as a trainer with a runner in the race?
How could I describe it? It's a little bit like, from a human perspective, if you were a coach training a football team and you've got your star striker and you kind of train him and you help him along and you make him pretty good. It's a little bit like being a jockey, whereas being a trainer, it's like, this is your own son that's on the team. Do you know what I mean? Like, you live and breathe this horse. Like, as a jockey, you're very much involved. You care. You ride the horse out at home. You school him at home. You ride him in all his races. You very much care. But it is a bit like, you do get off him and say your bit and jump in your car and go home and do your own thing. As a racehorse trainer, like, I used to feed Lord Windermere at 5:30 every morning. I'd either ride him myself at home, or else Gary that used to look after him would ride him. Then they'd have their lunch, then they'd have a rest in the afternoon, the horses at the yard, and then the lads would be doing up the horse in the evening. I'd have a wander around, And then last thing at night before I go to bed, I'd go out to the yard and have another wander around. And Lord Windermere was an oddball as well. I'd often come out at 9:30 at night. It was a really clear night because I trained in a beautiful farm up in the hill in the middle of nowhere. But on a clear night, you know, when the stars would be out, you could hear things from miles away. There'd be a fox killing a rabbit about 2 miles away. Lord Windermere's head out the door like that, and you know, lads were sweating, flying around the box. I'd have to take him out and wash him off and put him on the walker for half an hour and put him back to bed. He was a bit of a nutter. It took a lot of training, this horse, but yeah, he was extremely talented.
Yeah, personality-wise, you do see every little part of that, and I think probably what I don't appreciate and we don't appreciate as racegoers is they rock up and, you know, the names on the race card, they're there, but it is getting them there, isn't it, from the training perspective? If you do have a horse with quirks, foibles, physical difficulties, you manage those 24/7, pulling out every single morning, just hoping that there's not a lame step. What was he like as a horse? Difficult?
Well, I owe Lord Windermere a lot. Because when I started training, I wasn't doing a very good job, basically. I wasn't being very successful, and my owners backed me, particularly Dr. Lamb. And, you know, rightly so, they were all just maybe they're all very loyal, don't get me wrong, but mostly anyway. But some were starting to lose a little bit of faith in me, and I wouldn't blame them because I was not doing a good job. I was learning my trade, and although I'd been a jockey and all that, but I had never actually, you know, I never worked as an assistant trainer. I'd never really knew. I certainly.
And you didn't come going right the way back. Something we haven't chatted about. So you didn't actually come from a horse background in terms of.
No, I came from a town. My father was an accountant. All of my siblings went off to university, and I kind of took a gap year to work with horses, and kind of ended up giving it another year, and absolutely no regrets. Racing has been great to me, but back to Lord Windermere. Anyway, I went to a breeze up sale at Cheltenham with National Hunt horses, National Hunt breeze up sale. They tried them there for a couple of years. They kind of didn't really work, but it's nearly all 3-year-olds. It's kind of in December. 3-year-olds about to turn 4, and I looked at them all, and I came across one horse I loved, but he was a 4-year-old, so he was a year older than all the others. And he breezed terribly. He looked like a big, slow boat, right? But I liked him. He kind of looked, but he moved so easily. And Ken Whelan rode him in his breeze and said, "Jim, he's as green as grass, like, but he's nice, you know." So I took a punt and I bought him on spec, 75,000 sterling, a lot of money. And I said, you know, worst case scenario, I'll put 10 or 12 people together and make it affordable. And anyway, brought him home, telling Dr. Lamb what I'd bought, and he just basically said, "I'll have him. Do you like him?" I goes, "Yeah." And he had the pedigree as well. Back along, a real old-fashioned pedigree, but good pedigree. Oscar was a very good sire. He bought him and loved him in his homework, although he was like I said about best mate, he wouldn't have been that impressive in his homework, but you knew he'd kind of finish a bit of work upsides any horse. Do you know what I mean? He'd never go and beat them, but he'd just finish upsides them. A good horse, a bad horse. And you kind of knew that this, and he wouldn't blow a candle out. You knew this fella's loads of, when the day comes and you do give him a smack behind the saddle, there'll be. Anyway, I remember I brought him, because he was a bit green, he was just a bloody slow learner. So I brought him for a schooling race round Limerick, and Tom Doyle rode him, and Tom came in and said, "Jim, this is the horse you've been waiting for." And anyway, brought him for a novice hurdle first time out. I think he fell first time actually, because he was just he was going too easy and not looking what he was doing. He just fell over. Then he went the next day and won by literally by 25 lengths in a maiden hurdle around Thurles. And there's no bad maiden hurdles run that time of year, like in the autumn in Ireland, because you're always going to have Willie Mullins, Gordon Elliott. You know, there's no such thing. There's no bad maiden hurdles. I think Willie Mullins might have actually had an odds-on shot in that race. Anyway, Lord Windermere won by 25 lengths, and then his next run he won a listed hurdle, and his next run he won another probably listed hurdle or something. Yeah, he was very good, and then you just couldn't wait to send him chasing. Sure enough, very straightforward. I ran him over kind of 2 miles, 2.5 miles, because the ground was bottomless in Ireland that year. But knowing full well that he wanted 3 miles, and then brought him for the RSA, and he duly won. And everything seemed very simple, and I went from being a terrible trainer to a brilliant trainer, certainly in my own head.
Results-based business, as you know, isn't it?
Yeah.
Much, there's very little margin for error.
And everybody then said, oh, it was a bad RSA, he won. So I said, that suits me fine. Got a nice lenient handicap mark, which we will exploit in the Hennessy at Newbury. Trained him for that, delighted with myself, delighted with the horse, brought him over. Disappointed a little bit, finished 5th, ran well, but still, jockey said he took a bit of a blow 3 out, and he was fit, but I was a bit disappointed. And when he came home, he basically picked up something along the way, and he was sick.
Right.
He was sick for quite a while. And then he got damaged inside his lungs and things. And it became an extremely difficult horse to train then, because basically he was bleeding a bit. And as a result, I gave him a couple of kind of quietish runs. Didn't quite know how he was going to run, but knowing that he'd need a couple of runs before Cheltenham, before the Gold Cup. Disappointed a little bit, but I kind of knew why, and kind of knew more than everybody else did. And his price was drifting 33 to 1, 66 to 1, 100 to 1. I kept saying to Dr. Lamb, I will have him right in the day. And he, every Saturday, he'd have a few quid on at enormous prices. I promise you, on the day, he ended up winning a fortune. But shall I keep going, or are you good?
Well, I was going
to.
No, I mean, the interesting point, as you say, this is the archetypal thing of where you see something different at home, or you know the excuses. To the press and the wider world, he's an RSA winner that hasn't really trained on. You know, in terms of the form, he was miles behind a couple of rivals. I just paint the scene of who you're up against, really, because Silvianaco Conti and Bobsworth are the front two in the market. Bobsworth had won, I think, 3 consecutive times at the festival before. He'd been there, done it. But Silvianaco Conti was a little bit like we were talking about Courtauld Star. There was just that question mark, wasn't it, as to whether he was a flat track horse, whether he'd get up the hill. He'd come down 3 out in the Gold Cup the year before. It was billed as the rematch between the two. Did you pay much attention to them, or was the main objective for you to get your horse right on the day, given the problems you were facing?
For me, although Bobsworth was a good horse, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't very big. He wasn't a superstar. Do you know what I mean? There was no Denman or Courtauld Star around then. No, I just thought, I wouldn't have necessarily, if Bestmate hadn't, or if Lord Windermere hadn't picked up that kind of sickness after the Hennessy in December, and if I'd gone there like a clear run like we did for the RSA, I'd have been more confident. But it's hard to believe this, but I was very, very confident, and I kept saying to Dr. Lamb all the way through that season, come Cheltenham, we will not be out of the first 3. Because, fair enough, if something comes and beats us, but like 3 of them aren't going to finish in front of us because they're not that good, in my opinion. Or we're as good as them, do you know what I mean? On a good day. And I suppose I'd kind of, because I'd done it at Cheltenham the year before, and things were going better for me, although it didn't appear as again for the press, because I hadn't had a winner for ages, but actually they were running great. They were all finishing second. Racing in Ireland is bloody tough. And I had
banging your head against the ball.
I had something about 5 winners that season in about 25 seconds. Do you know what I mean? The horses were running great. They just weren't winning because they weren't good enough. Anyway,
do you feel pot committed in that sense? You know what I mean? Once you've begun to talk a good game, do you feel sort of that you've got to stick to that?
Do you know? One of the things I learned about training, I kind of went in like a lot of trainers. I had a head lad, and he'd feed in the morning, and somebody said it. Who was it? I think it was somebody like Alan King said to me once. I think it might have been Alan King, who was going through a bit of a bad, we're just chatting, and I went through a bit of a bad run once, and Sir Mark Prescott told me, who feeds the horse in the morning? I said, he goes, the head lad. Feed him yourself. And Alan King said that to me. So I said, I set my alarm at 5 every morning. My lads came in at 7. I set my alarm at 5. I was on the yard by 5:20, fed all the horses myself. My God, you learn more about a horse at 5:30 in the morning than you will watching him do 20 gallops.
In what way? What do you see that you don't see in more conventional circumstances?
There's the famous saying, has he eaten up? A lot of them will have eaten up, but they love they'll kick you over, knock you out of the way to get their food in the morning. And then sometimes they'll have eaten up, but they're not knocking you out of the way to get their food. And then this horse just wants an easy couple of days, and you know what I mean? Whereas a head lad will never, in my opinion, translate that to you as well as you seeing it firsthand.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and my training career changed completely when I started feeding the horse myself. It meant getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I hate getting up in the morning.
Because I went into that mistake. Yeah, I can understand that. I think the ability to understand the horses, literally, as I say, rather than you mentioned the point about the jockey. I think that's the point. I think the public probably don't realise how many horses you ride as a jockey that you've never sat on. It's amazing, really, when you think you're going to partner them over particularly over fences, 35 miles an hour, and but that is completely different when you train them.
Goes back to Chris Broad, my agent, riding a favourite in the Gold Cup as mate in 2 weeks' time, and he gets me a 33-1 outsider for a permit holder down the West Country in a novice chase round Stratford, first time over fences. And I'm like, no way, not a hope.
He tells me it's got a chance. Okay, let's take it then to that. You've got the horse on the day. You've travelled him over. You've had some issues to deal with. You say he's going to be right on that day at Cheltenham. In your mind, was he?
Yeah, I got him to the best of his ability, the best of my ability. I got him there in a frame of mind and a state of health that he would hopefully be able to perform to the best of his ability with a little bit of luck, which you're always going to need. But I was still, he was a very good jumper. I was still very confident that he would finish in the first 3, due to the fact he had been bleeding and everything, like Davy and I discussed it, and we were always going to ride him kind of patiently, because you don't want to rush a horse with a history of bleeding. You don't want to rush them early, because you'll just burst them. The idea is get them warmed up very gradually, the rhythm thing again, but even more gradually than usual. You know what I mean? Put them to sleep early and all that. Davey did take that to the next level now.
Yes. So first of all, there's quite a large field, because even maybe a few shared your view that both Bobsworth and Sylvian Arca-Conti were potentially vulnerable. So we did have a larger field, and maybe slightly unusually, that field remained well bunched in the main. But after not that far, there's one horse that's out the back by 5 lengths or so, and that's you. What are your thoughts at that point, knowing the instructions?
I could see they were going too fast in front. I just went too fast in front the whole way through. They went too fast, then they kicked too soon. Like they quickened going down the hill, going down the back. Second time around they quickened, and then they almost kicked for home from turning down after the last ditch. Like, you can't do that at Cheltenham. It's just once you hit that rising ground, it's a long way. So I was very confident they would stop in front. So the fact we were last, I didn't mind it, and the horse was jumping brilliantly. And at a time, no, I wasn't totally comfortable with it, but I could half see what David was doing, tipping away as long as. But it was when he started to detach. I was thinking, no, David, Lord Windermere is a lazy horse. Like, if you end up detached, even 3 lengths detached, all you got to do is make one mistake, and you're all of a sudden 7 lengths last, and then you're in serious bother. But I then, with a circle to go, I was watching my horse more closely than anybody else in the world was watching him. You know what I mean? And I could see Davey had never moved a muscle on him. He hadn't even given him a tap on the shoulder. Like, he literally hadn't moved a muscle on him. I was thinking, Jesus, Davey, you're playing this fairly cool. And then, jumped the last with a circle to go. They turned down the back. The lads started quickening again. Davey didn't. He just tipped away, got a bit further back. And I'm thinking, and at one point, I think probably maybe around the last ditch or somewhere, Dr. Lamb said, Jim, this is disgraceful. And he kind of went to walk away. And I said, hang fire, Ronan, these will stop in front and he will pick up. And hoping that Davey would ask him to pick up. And sure enough, what can I say? The rest is history. And then, yeah, probably about 3 out I said, he will be in the first 3. You mark my words, he will be in the first 3. And yeah, sure enough, the rest is history. We got there, but yeah. Just
So let's pick it up and coming down the hill, because, yeah, the point you've made is that in a way, once you know you haven't got detached, as you begin to pass them, it begins to act in your favour, doesn't it, for those sort of horses? The Giant Bolster had been back with you and you began to make ground together. Silvinaco Conti had gone for home quite a long way out, considering he was doubtful at the trip. There were still horses everywhere. And going to the last, or going to the second last, you were probably still no closer than 5th or 6th. But that's when the wheels began to come off for a few. It remains one of the most chaotic finishes. I was spotting for Mark Johnson that day. You're meant to be pointing those horses that are going to finish. And I'm sort of, that one. Ooh, I haven't a clue, Mark. It's like, they're going to last, just go for your life. And it was, from our side, a bun fight of a finish. When did you know you were going to win?
Well, I never thought I was going to win. I thought I was going to be in the first 3. And that's and I thought that the whole way. Starting 99% of the way. Yeah, obviously.
The 1% when you have back.
Yeah, obviously, you do worry a bit, but yeah, I thought it'd be. I never thought we would win, but I thought we would be in the first 3 the whole way, and but I knew they'd stop in front. I knew they'd kick too soon, and I knew that my fella will pick up. He'll not only will he stay on strong, but he will actually pick up. And a horse like him, when you pass horses, it gives him confidence, and you pick up another bit and another bit and another bit. And thankfully, the most important thing was that he didn't miss a fence, and he didn't. He winged fences, and Davy Russ was the right man on him for that job. Like, he's brilliant to get horses jumping, and yeah, got there. And
you did get there. I'm going to say, when you watch it, where were you watching from, and how far did you think you'd won by?
I was standing with the owner and his brother, and there was a silent partner in the ownership as well, Dr. Climax, and then all their family in the whole house. There was a right gang of them, and I was with them, and you can imagine now, it didn't feel great halfway around, but in the end, it was like all the hugs and kisses and all that, and next thing, ding ding, Stuart's inquiry.
So
and I was thinking, actually, we've nothing to worry about, 1/2 a length. And then Ronan's brother, Dr. Dan's brother, Liam, says, no, Jim, ahead is the official distance. And then I thought, oh, jeez.
Yeah, so the drama hadn't ended there. So to explain what had happened, basically you changed course. Everyone was changing course because horses were diving left, diving right. And in moving out, they'd started a chain reaction, which did include the second horse on his own. And as you say, I think most of us going past the line thought the winning margin was greater just because of the angle. But the way the stewards work is it's the margin you've been beaten versus the interference. And so there's a massive difference, isn't there? But as you say, by winning 1/2 a length, very unlikely to get it taken off you, and winning ahead. You should say Claxon goes, and all of a sudden the race you've won, or you think you've won, you haven't won yet. I would imagine Davy's a pretty good person to have going into bat for you in the inquiry.
Yeah. But David Casey will be too.
Yes, of course, he was the other one, wasn't he?
Yeah, David Casey's clever, very clever. Yeah, there are 2 men going into a courtroom with 2 bloody good barristers. Yeah,
was presumably it was a long time. I mean, I don't know. I can't remember obviously on course as to how long it seemed. I'm sure, however it's long it seemed to me, it seemed 5 times longer to you. Yeah,
exactly. I don't know. I think I can hardly remember because I think I blocked that bit out of my brain. To be honest with you. Or maybe I got that celebrated that much after. Maybe I killed a few brain cells. I don't know, but. Anyway, the announcement came, winner number whatever, Lord Windermere. So then it was all cheers and everybody was celebrating everything. And next minute, like somebody said, do you think they might appeal?
I hadn't even thought of that. Did they? I can't remember, to be honest.
And they arguably would have had grounds to appeal, and because it was very, very 50-50 decision. So
that's very fair of you, because I think likewise. I think when we watched it, we all thought first time, no. And then you do watch it. And, it is your movement that causes the shift, that causes another shift.
Yeah, yeah. It was somebody else's shift.
It was like a little
wave somebody else's shift caused my horse to shift.
Yeah.
Then, but we did, yeah. Anyway, so it was a tough. It would have been a tough call from the steward's point of view. It fell our way, thank God. Then some spoiled sport, of course, probably won the press.
We like that, you know that.
Says they might appeal, But anyway, thankfully, Willie Mullins and Graham Wiley, sporting, like Willie Mullins, but obviously been at the job forever, and Graham Wiley as well now, very sporting of them, said, no, we've lost it on the day, that's the end of it. And the celebrations were long and many.
Absolutely. And it put you, in the modern era, a unique position of having ridden and trained a winner of the Gold Cup, which is a fantastic achievement, and one, when you're sitting at home just reflecting on everything, must give you a massive amount of pride.
Four Gold Cups in the cupboard, yeah.
Yeah, it's 3 from the one and the one else.
You get a gold goblet.
Is that what you get to keep?
Yeah, the owner gets quite a big, kind of a fancy Gold Cup thing, but the trainer and the jockey gets a gold goblet like the size of a wine glass. And yes, there's been lots of things drank out of them. Yes.
Four
and still are every now and again.
Just on those 2 races, before I'm going to ask you the killer question as to what you think was the best one of the 3 that we've looked at. Sometimes you get a great horse. You had that in Best Mate. Sometimes you get a great race. And that doesn't necessarily mean the horses involved are as high a calibre. Of the 2, what was your greatest personal satisfaction? Not necessarily equating the 2. Which do you feel was the one that you
I would
respect more?
For me personally, like from anybody's point of view looking at me, they would say the association with Best Mate. That is what I'm known for. It was unbelievable horse, the whole lot. For me personally, to get Lord Windermere to win a Gold Cup with the problems he had developed that season gives me an enormous sense of pride in my own ability, because by God, I've never worked as hard in my life to get him there. And probably changed me as a person, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? My former father-in-law was a highly successful businessman, and he used to come up with all these one-liners for me, bits of advice, core business and all these kind of things, and all these statements. And one of them is, there is no substitute for hard work. And by God, that is the truth of it. As a jockey, as a racehorse trainer, there is no substitute for hard work. There are no shortcuts.
Now, obviously, your personal association will make it quite hard for me to get an answer out of you for these 3, because unfortunately, Jim, mine's Denman, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's just my personal thing. Do you look back at Lord Windermere of the 3 that we looked at then as the pick of that trio?
No, Best Mate would be the pick of the trio for me. No, he was a star, and no, of those 3 horses, no, Best Mate was a standout for me, and he'd be a standout. And I'm not being derogatory to Lord Windermere, Denman, Caught a Star, any of them, but as I said about Best Mate, he could have quite easily won the festival 5 times. He did win 3 times. People were saying it wasn't a great era of Gold Cups, etc., etc., etc. He still did it, and the kind of horse he was. I know everybody loved Denman. Everybody loved Caught a Star. They had massive followings. But in 100 years from now, they won't remember Caught a Star or Denman or Lord Windermere, but they will remember Best Mate.
Because he's on the roll
like
of 3
Arkle.
times. Yeah.
I'm not saying Best Mate was as good as Arkle. He's probably better than Arkle, and he was a sounder horse. Like Arkle was, I think, was a big ugly thing, but he used to kick the odd fence out of the ground and everything, but he'd obviously an enormous engine on him. But I think Best Mate will be remembered because he did it 3 times in a row.
And just finally, to wrap up, we're on the build-up to the Cheltenham Festival this time. I don't know how many horses there'll be over the course of the 28 races now. We'll be talking 350 jockeys, trainers, more owners who are going there with the Cheltenham word having started back in October and November. How do you watch the festival now, knowing that most of those dreams are going to be dashed, but for the select few, they are going to be left with memories that will live with them for absolutely ever?
What I was looking for, I thought I might be looking forward to Oisin Murphy on Constitution Hill. That's not the case now. I love Cheltenham. I haven't missed it even since I've been out of the game. And I will be there the 4 days again this year. Drive up and down every day. I used to stay there overnight, but I realised I'm a bit of old age is setting in. I haven't got the stamina for that anymore. But I just, like we all have our horses that we kind of like and don't like so much, and we have our people, jockeys, trainers, owners. We kind of
the stories are what make it, aren't they? You, for example, for me, I might bump into a set of owners during the course of the season where and you do just begin to think, actually, yeah,
I'd love them to have a winner at Cheltenham.
Yeah, just because you know the pressure you're giving. I mean, Plum is a commentator. Most of the time you're telling people bad news, and you are as a rider, aren't you, as well? You're beaten in, even if you're a top-class rider, you're beaten in over 75% of your races. So.
And I love seeing the underdog win, to be honest with you. I know the powerhouses are kind of necessary, but, I think the racing world has gone a little bit like shops and supermarkets. The village shop is closing down because everybody's going to the supermarket. You know what I mean? And I think if somebody won the lottery tomorrow and they wanted a racehorse in training and they didn't know anything about racing, they Google who'll have a racehorse in training with. You're going to get, in Ireland, you're going to get Willie Mullins or Gordon Elliott or Henry de Bromhead or now maybe Gavin Cromwell. I hope I'm not leaving anybody out, and the small people aren't getting a chance, so I just love to see the small people get a chance.
Jim, thanks very much for your company. Hope you've enjoyed going back down memory lane with our Cheltenham special on Rematch. Who knows, maybe in a few years' time, somebody else will be sitting here reliving one of this year's Cheltenham Festival races as one of their greatest ever. It always splits opinion. Hope you've enjoyed it, and all the very best for the festival as it comes up.
And I hope I haven't bored anybody with the past.
It didn't bore me, Jim, for sure.